Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait for a few more people to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're just going to get started and then I'll let people trickle in. So thank you to everyone for attending today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Turney Saha, the Marketing and Communications Manager at the Canadian Hygiene Association. A brief overview, today's agenda includes a quick introduction to the CHA, then I'll pass it off to the speakers to introduce themselves. We'll jump right into the panel session and then we'll wrap it up with a 15-minute Q&A session at the end. Please feel free to drop any questions you have during the panel session in the chat, and we'll try to address them as we go or at the very end during the Q&A session. Right, just a quick introduction. So about the Canadian Hygiene Association, we're a national industry association established in 2009, and we have over 180 members with provincial affiliates in Alberta, BC, and Ontario, and then partnerships with Hygiene Quebec and the Atlantic Hygiene Alliance. Our main is advocacy, government relations, and
here's some information.
That was very weird. Our main role is advocacy, government relations, communications, and we act as a main networker within the hygiene industry in Canada and then on the international stage for Canada. These are our wonderful members, as you can see. And then we'll jump right into our speakers. So Rebecca Goldsack, COO of Diesel Tech Industries, Bob Roy, co-founder and COO of Vern, Evan Grant, owner and operations manager at Creative Truck Performance, and Ian Payne, director of Ready Mix Performance at Lafarge. I'll pass it over to Rebecca to give a brief introduction of herself.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for having us today. My name is Rebecca. I have been with the organization for about 15 years now. What we do is we have what we call our Guardian hydrogen dual fuel technology. So what we do is take an existing asset available on the market today, Class 8 truck, waste unit, transit unit, you name it, that has a Tier 4 engine on it, and we retrofit it using our multi-port injection system. We have been successful to run on 80% hydrogen, 20% diesel at an idle, and 40 to 50% driving down the highway.
Great. I'll pass it off to Bob.
Right. Thank you for your time. I'm Bav Roy, co-founder and chief operating officer at Vern. So Vern is a hydrogen technology company. We develop the storage and refueling technology to double the density of hydrogen. And what that means is that hydrogen trucks, including dual fuel engine trucks, can store double the hydrogen in half the amount of space. And so that provides weight savings, cost savings, or it can double the range. And so we're excited to work with Rebecca and DTI to demonstrate a sleeper cab dual fuel engine truck in Alberta in early next year.
I'll pass it off to Evan.
Hi, everyone. My name's Evan Grant. I'm owner of Creative Truck Performance Limited. We're based in Regina, Saskatchewan. We have a small fleet of 7 trucks that haul bulk fuel within the province. I myself am a journey-person truck and transport mechanic with 17 years of dealer and fleet maintenance experience. This experience has allowed Creative Truck Performance to open up a repair shop to help with our dual fuel hydrogen retrofitting needs and anything that comes with it in the future, and to help other small operations like ours with this sort of transition.
And Ian, last but not least.
Thanks, Tony. My name is Ian Payne. I'm the performance director for Ready Mix in Western Canada with Lafarge. Lafarge is part of the Wholesome group of companies worldwide. We're the largest single heavy building materials provider, something like 60 countries with around 65,000 employees. In Western Canada, as part of my portfolio, I oversee the evolution of our ready mix concrete truck fleet, which is about 700 trucks. And within North America, we run about 3,000 trucks within North America. So I'm keen to keep us on a path to decarbonization by using some of the technologies that Rebecca and Bob provide, as well as understanding Evan's innovations as well.
Great. And with those, we'll get started with the panel session. So our first question of the day is, with operations across Western Canada, what are the biggest challenges facing your company when considering alternative fuels that are unfamiliar to most and even perceived as a threat by some? I think this would be most relevant to Evan and even Ian.
Yeah, so Saskatchewan's at very early stages of talking about hydrogen. Alberta's a little more advanced. So some of the threats I'm seeing when talking to customers and people within the industry is the assumption that considering alternative fuels in our operation is a political decision, and that we're against diesel fuel energy and against the diesel fuel industry. That is, that's not true, in any form. A couple other myths. And it's really, very base stuff, myths in advertising and the mainstream auto industry. They're not comparable industries. You can't take what you see on commercials and compare it to, the heavy duty truck application. And then and then not comparing apples to apples. Everybody's operation is different. Lafarge's operation is different than my heavy haul application in Saskatchewan. Our geography is different. So you have to make sure when you're talking to customers that you are understanding their application, doing the math as fast as you can in your head and saying, well, this is what you're going to see compared to what I'm going to see. So those are the threats that I've got for early stages.
Yeah, for myself, the threats is mostly about alignment in people. As we explore alternative fuels and different ways to lower our carbon footprint of our transportation activities, we have to keep in mind that it impacts a great number of employees and vendors as well as customers across our businesses. Just in Western Canada, we have 60 different locations, and we have a heritage fleet there. So if we have a brand new move on a new technology, and then we try to retrofit it into the fleet, how do we deal with that across such a broad group of people? And over a long period of time, this is a minimum decade to 15, even 20-year evolution that we'll have to deal with. So the alignment of people's goals and outcomes has to be really clear. And even if someone may disagree with something at a local level, they have to understand that they will understand that if it meets their outcomes from a GWP standpoint, it'll be beneficial. Beyond that, the key challenge that we have within our company is that not only are we a trucking outfit, we are actually a manufacturer during that trucking and transportation. So a key consideration for us is the investment and where we make it to lower our emissions of our end product, and where do we spend that money for the largest impact. And some of it is actually in the concretes. So we're in the ready mix business. Is the concretes itself are the largest single carbon issue on that truck, and then the transportation is quite secondary. So we really have to make sure that we're getting a substantial gain from our investment, or else we just put most of our time into the materials. So those are kind of the hurdles. I'd rather use the term than threat.
And on that point, how do you address the concerns and resistance you may face from stakeholders, investors, and employees when it comes to introducing hydrogen and maybe even retrofitting fleets?
So I've had a few conversations, and I have to use my background as a mechanic and as a technician and maintenance professional that I believe in this technology. We're really at the trust stage when I'm talking to people and gaining their trust that I'm not attacking, the diesel industry, where I'm actually looking to benefit and move everybody forward and learn how to do it so that we can pass that experience on. So openly talking about it, why we believe in it. I have to lead with action, and educate with facts. So investing in a truck, having people being able to come and see it, touch it, ask questions, talk about it. That's all part of, what we're doing to lead on that end. And then talking directly about the benefits, but also the spin-off benefits. I have a machine shop I work with, and they're worried about what's coming in the future, and some of this stuff is like, oh, if you get into these types of avenues, there's going to be no end in sight, really. Like, and that's a spin-off industry. It's not even directly related. So you start to mention those benefits, and it gets everybody's curiosity and minds moving, and how can they get involved, right? So that's kind of how we tackle that.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could build on that one a little bit, again, back to alignment, it's about having the buy-in of the experts within your broader community. So the community within Lafarge, it includes quite a few maintenance professionals, for example. It includes a lot of stakeholders that were around when we adopted the emission systems changes in 2010. That we learned a lot of lessons for, even up to 15 years later. We're still paying for some of those issues, right? So having the right people at the table to make sure that the buy-in is there is critical. Now let people you have to let people experiment as well. So we have opportunity where at a corporate level we can somewhat dictate that usually the outcomes that we're looking for. Here's the support we're willing to give, and here's the support we have and will give. But then at a local level, what do you want to do? What do you see, and what do you want to do to make sure you've got that enthusiasm and the buy-in, regardless of the tech? Because I think that's going to change so much that won't even matter. What will matter is, are people bought in to what they're trying to do?
Mm-hmm. And would you say buy-in is the main challenge related to retrofitting existing infrastructure then? Or do you see other main challenges alongside that?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes. Because if your
Okay.
maintenance professional in your local market doesn't like what they're seeing, you will have a very challenging time making progress, no matter what. So those people that role within my ecosystem, they must be at the table, and that's the only way forward.
And Bob and Rebecca, do you see it the same way, being on the other side of the supply chain there?
Yeah, definitely. So from our side of it, we definitely, much to sentiment, Ian and Evan's points on, this is a huge education session right now. So a lot of it, whether you're talking to stakeholders, executive directors and such like that, or if you're simply talking to, a driver that's actually going to be driving this vehicle, it's letting them know what it is, how it works, and answering those, what they think, oh, that's a stupid question, but it's not, because someone else has asked that same question to us. So, whether, when I go to Ottawa and, they don't even know that dual fuel is an option. It's really demonstrating the technology to industry, showing them what it does, how it works, and how simple it is for that end user, and how, simple it is for a fleet to actually adapt into their fleet.
Yeah, just to build upon what's been said, I think it's really a question of kind of getting hands-on experience with the technology. I mean, like diesel has been a reliable solution for as long as we can remember. And so for people to really transition their fleet over to hydrogen or something else, they need to get the hands-on experience to understand the operational issues, understand what that means for their service network, for fuel availability, for truck price. And so that's why companies like DTI and Vern and others are looking to give fleets like early hands-on experience with 1 to 10 trucks, let them see what it looks like, and then kind of build upon with education as to like what does this look like in terms of mass adoption, like where can the infrastructure rollout expand to, because right now it's not quite there. Where can the service network roll out to, and where can the vehicle improve on in terms of cost and performance?
And at the same time, too, dual fuel is really that bridge technology. We need to walk before we can run. One of the big things that I hear a lot of is range anxiety within fleets, where they're like, well, I can't do, a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle because I drive, Edmonton to Vancouver. And if I went on a deviation between that, it didn't have that hydrogen supply. So this is where it's so nice to do dual fuel, because if you, typically do one route, end up doing another route, you're actually just running on diesel. Or if, a site was down and you weren't able to get that hydrogen supply. So it's, hydrogen is very similar to how diesel operates, but it is obviously new. There's learning to come with it. And this just kind of helps industry alleviate that chicken and egg until there's hydrogen available in every street corner. This is that next step to, decarbonization to get to net zero. But it's also that cost-effective way to do it, because fleets can't afford to spend, 3 to 4 times, what they would pay for a traditional Class 8 application. And the technology is just not there today. So they're at least making an impact. Reducing it by 80% is still a huge GHG reduction. And that's kind of where this dual fuel really plays into it.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess shifting gears a little bit. So then, Bob and Rebecca, what are the important factors and opportunities that maybe organizations or fleets are looking at when adopting dual fuel systems or even full hydrogen into their fleets?
I'll go first. So the big thing with this is whether you're, Evan with 7 trucks or
Mhm.
Ian with 3,000 trucks, it is a technology that can be adapted by any fleet size. You don't need to be big or small. You can be a municipality. It just doesn't. It's not only for the big guys, and that's really where this plays a really nice piece into what fleets are going to be able to decarbonize.
Yeah, and then I'd just like to start with like reiterating one of Evan's points that like fleet needs are not the same, right? Like fleets have very different needs, very different decision-making processes, regardless of size, actually. And so what we're seeing is consistent is that they care about vehicle cost and performance, they care about infrastructure availability, and they care about the service network. That is kind of consistent across all fleets. Then they have different kind of preferences in terms of payload and range and how willing they are to engage with earlier technologies, or do they want to first see it on the road everywhere before they adopt? And so I think those are kind of the various factors that come into any sort of fleet adoption decision for dual fuel or fuel cell.
Mm-hmm. And given those, I guess each fleet is different. So this is kind of directed to maybe Ian, Evan, you can give an example of how your company's approached this, but what specific steps has your company taken to evaluate the feasibility of retrofitting your existing infrastructure, if it's different for each fleet across the country?
Yeah, so there was a lot of math off the start, lots of spreadsheets with Rebecca to see how this was going to work, how much we were going to use, and even getting them to understand my application. Once they got their tablets in my trucks, then we could look at some graphs and see Saskatchewan's extremely flat, and you'd think it's really light loads all the time, but we're we're overloaded, so we're at 72.5 kg. You get a side wind, and we're 100% torque all day long. So our
Mhm.
application for this hydrogen is maybe actually kind of unique in that it's more of a complementing fuel rather than a main fuel, because we need torque so long or for so much in the day. Yeah, it's just a very everybody's application is going to be different and where they want to benefit from the use of this hydrogen. So translating that to the end user is very important.
That's kind of interesting. We're the opposite of Evan on the ready mix side. I don't think our average truck speed is something around 18 kilometers per hour is the average speed that our trucks travel when they travel. Our trucks actually sit 60% of their time and spin a drum on the back. So when you look at our fuel consumption, the key issue we have is that balance between, do we even burn enough diesel here to make this function in the right way, and do we burn it at the right temperatures, and from the perspective of efficiency. Things that we're looking for is so on our side, because of the amount of idling that we do, we really end up with a lot of costs on our emissions management side, right? And that's been hugely challenging for us, to the point where we've been evaluating other alternative fuels, but also the ability just to turn the truck off and not burn any fuel and run the body on electricity only. So in the future, we actually see an electric truck of some kind. We'll see fuel cell way down the road, but mostly because we can run the body in our manufacturing process on electricity at the time, rather than moving the truck. So there's a lot of math, like Evan says. There's a lot of math on how this actually functions. We think we know where we are, I believe, with the hydrogen injection and dual fuel. And now it's time to look at the impact on the emission systems itself and our maintenance side of that. Like, how clear is that gain? Because that is a cost for us that's very problematic. And then where can we get the price of hydrogen? Where are we going to, how are we going to manage this piece? Because we know the $25 and $30 kilogram hydrogen doesn't really fit into the business model right now. Okay, so that being said, if we participate in it and we're one of the ones that drives the supply chain, how quickly does that price of hydrogen per kilogram come down and fit into our business model? So those are some of the questions we're starting to look at. Much to, I noticed in the chat, Paul Purdon noted, are people looking at refueling stations versus fueling it in their yards and things like that. We because we're back to base, our trucks are back to base 5-6 times a day. We would look to have a fueling system very close to our base, so we do rounds and rounds. And Rebecca and her team have been working with things like how much hydrogen do we actually need on a truck to then lower the cost of the installation on the truck itself, which is good, but also to minimize, and over to where Bav is spending his energy, pardon the pun, on having a very compact fueling transportation system. So to again lower the cost per kilogram of the hydrogen that we would consume.
And that's a great point, Ian. And jumping off of your point on the price of hydrogen, given that the conversation around hydrogen and implementing hydrogen systems has been largely driven by governments at various levels, what role do you see the industry playing in driving future discussions? And what specific financial incentives or funding mechanisms have been most effective in supporting hydrogen conversion? Rebecca, I know you have done a lot of work in advocacy and you sit on our Hydrogen Alberta board. Maybe you can speak to a little bit about that.
Frozen a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to answer one question on the prior point that Evan and Ian just put. So we've actually installed what we call our Guardian Fleet Data Logger, because we want that quantifiable data to have our fleets have. So we want to know, how many hours they're idling a day, how many hours they're driving a day, what their average fuel economy is, because we all know we buy a brand new vehicle and they have that sticker that says you get this many liters per 100. You and I both know we've never once attained that number. And so we want that real world data so that we can say, this is how many kilometers are driven, this is how much hydrogen is going to be used, this is how much diesel is used, to ultimately provide that GHG reduction. So whether that government is a regulatory body or, Evan and Ian that just want to have that data analytics, which then goes into the next point on, we as an industry have heavily been advocating both provincially and federally to provide immediate reduction for the cost of hydrogen. So, a lot of fleets as an interim solution, are having a hydrogen trailer that they fill from, so that it would be at a site. They can fill from that. That is a temporary solution. And then, that chicken and egg that we've all been talking about is getting the cost down over the next little bit. But the only way to bring the cost down is to have obviously more units on the road. So this is where government and us really pushing both provincially and federally for some subsidy program, so that even if that hydrogen supply company, it costs them $35 a kilogram, the government provides that subsidy to bring it between $12 and $15, to bring it more relevant to what your hydrogen supply needs are. And then on the caveat to that, you are reducing costs on the emission system. So, when you look at how much DEF fluid average fleet uses, they're spending an average of $15,000 a year on DEF fluid. By running on hydrogen and diesel, you're actually reducing the cost for that, because hydrogen is steam cleaning the engines out. So then they're running more efficiently. So then they're not using the emission system. So there's a whole bunch of extra savings that you're getting on the back side of this as well. And it's very much dependent on how that fleet operates. So things like on Evan's fleet, when he is on that, he was saying high load, heavy, full of fuel, he's actually not going to be using that much hydrogen. Now, having said that, on his way back, he's obviously on much lower load. There's not a whole bunch on the engine. He's going to be way higher amounts of hydrogen on that. So, when we talk about efficiency of the engine, it's really depends on how that fleet operates, because, someone that has an idle all day, they're going to be using way more hydrogen. So they're going to have ultimately a higher GHG reduction than somebody's on heavy load, high load all day long. So it's very fleet dependent, and even vehicle dependent, driver dependent. There's a lot of things that play into it. So that's where that FDL becomes so prevalent in the conversion.
And I'd love to hear from Bob, given Vern's technology for cryocompressed hydrogen and bringing down the price of hydrogen there.
Yeah, so today, if we think about the incredibly expensive cost of hydrogen fuel today at the pump, some of that is due to production, some of that is due to distribution, some of that is due to station costs. And as Rebecca said, like as we increase utilization, have more vehicles on the road, a lot of these costs will come down. But also, like they'll come down, but there needs to be a faster ramp down to really accelerate the adoption of hydrogen. And that's where Vern's cryocompressed technology and there's also new ways to produce hydrogen at lower cost will really be provide kind of step changes to the cost of hydrogen at the pump. And so we're in discussions with partners in both Canada and the US to really bring down the cost of delivering hydrogen to the pump in exactly the right state that it needs to be to fill the onboard storage systems. And so what we can expect to see starting 2027 onwards, some more significant reductions in cost, irrespective of the utilization.
And what do you think is going to be like the main, I guess, the top opportunity for accessibility to hydrogen to create more cost-efficient hydrogen? Is going to be technology? Is it going to be advocacy? So on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of ingredients. One is new technology. The other is kind of the learning curve of just having more and more units, more production units, more distribution units available. And then also just having a more dense network, so that the less you need to move the hydrogen around, the cheaper it's going to be. And so if we have more production sites closer to where the stations are, that will also bring down cost.
Great, that's a great point. I guess moving on to the next question then. So what are the critical infrastructure upgrades or developments needed in Canada and North America to support a broader adoption of hydrogen as a fuel source? And how do you see public and private partnerships playing a role in this? Don't all speak at once.
That sounds like a Rebecca question to me.
Oh, you're muted.
It's like I haven't done this before. My gosh. So there's a couple key things to this. The nice thing about dual fuel is that it is exempt under Transport Canada because it is tied into the fuel system. So as far as regulatory side of things go, because it does have those things and it makes it easier. Now, having said that, all of our technology, so things like the tanks, they are all EC79 standards. So there's several standards within the system that function. There is things like regulatory side. So what I was talking about before with that quantifiable data and ultimately getting a carbon tax credit or whatever version of that you want to call it. But how government wants to see that information so that, you know, whether it's right when you fuel, that you get that reduction, that carbon tax credit, or whether it's you submit a report every 3 months with what your GHG reduction was. So those are the types of things that we're working through with government today. And then there's other little things that kind of play into that too. So things like a facility, being able to bring a facility into a yard. So in case anyone is around tomorrow, Velocity out of Edmonton has their unveiling of their hydrogen facility so that you can go into a facility running on hydrogen. But the nice thing about dual fuel and how that kind of plays out is you don't need to drive in on hydrogen, so you don't have to, you know, you can run in on diesel, which has been industry standard for the last 50 plus years. So those types of things, and just government catching up with the regulatory side. We've worked extensively with all different levels of government, all different you know, groups within government to get a feel for where industry is. We've received all set approvals on our technology. You know, there's going to be changes in the next 5-10 years, but we are developing, and what we work to is the EU standard, which is far exceeding what Canadian regulations are currently in place.
And Bob, you're based out of the US. Do you feel the same way about that, or do you see differing opinions on that?
No, I think that pretty closely aligned with Rebecca there. I think there's been a lot of regulation in the US that can support the adoption of hydrogen, especially in California. But we're now starting to see that broaden out to what other regions. But we're really excited to see all the work in Alberta as well.
Great. And we're going to backtrack a little bit to Ian's point about buy-in being one of the biggest challenges. So how does your company approach the training and education of your workforce then to ensure a smooth transition to operating and maintaining hydrogen fueled systems? Evan, feel free to chime in there.
Go ahead, Ian.
Oh, I thought you said Evan. Okay, Trini, I'll start with that one. Again, you know, the professionals that we have at a local level are, we network them, first of all. So I can tell you that our lead mechanics, technicians, as well as our maintenance managers across Western Canada are actually all work together as a group. When we introduce new technologies or even ask them how they're doing with current technologies that are being provided by vendors, you know, one of our key vendors for truck solutions today is Peterbilt, for example. So, you know, how are we doing with the MX engines? You know, what's going on with the Borg-Warner ECMs that we had on, you know, some of them. We share all that across all of our maintenance management group. So as we introduce some of these new things, we're pretty actively having those conversations as we go along. And we ask for volunteers. We actually ask for, you know, which shop are you able to try this now? Are you prepared for this? Do you have the right people within your team that are interested in these things that they would like to participate in this, be it electrification or alternative fuels at the engine, or even different components on the trucks themselves. Simple things, even like putting super single tires on ready-mix trucks. That's very unusual in North America, especially in Canada. So, you know, where did we do that? We did that in Western Canada here at one of our locations where the technician said, yes, we want to try that. The maintenance manager says, yeah, I think I believe in that. I'll do it. They put their hand up. So we do that in Calgary. And we do something else here. We do something in Winnipeg. We do something here. So that's how we build that kind of the team approach to innovation and the trust that they are a part of the decision-making processes and the opinions and are valued, and knowing full well that whatever we adopt in the future, that's the team that has to make it successful.
So on my end, we're in the very early stages, and right now it's familiarizing first, making sure everybody in the organization kind of knows what our goals are and what our aspirations are with this technology. We have frequent conversations and updates. We try and send them to alternative fuel events, and not just specifically hydrogen. I sent a couple people or my people out to BC. They got to see all the technology, and when they came back, their eyes were just a little bit brighter. They were just a little bit more like, well, this is cool. I had no idea. They actually came from the dealership realm, and I don't know if that information doesn't get let out, or they just don't see it, but so they really like that. We start by debunking the myths with especially with our drivers. Drivers talk, rumors start. They listen to the radio, so they come back, they have questions, we calm them down, we set them on the right path again, right? And then we show them the technology. Being able to buy into DTI's system early has been such a huge advantage. I really encourage early adoption just to start the conversation and to have hard parts to look at and to see it work. It just gets everybody's mind going. And then that kind of buys us time to get into the later stages of, which will be closer to rollout, and using the truck will be, your fuel handling training, your technician training, safety and repairs, maintenance, all that, to make sure it gets looked after safely and we're certified to do all that. And then continue with those stakeholder meetings in local organizations around Saskatchewan with our energy producers, making, they're very interested in what we're trying to do. And our business model, because we're modeling it around supporting after selling. So it's not just my operation. So if they have an operation or somebody else has an operation, we want to make sure they're supported. So we're really focusing in on that aspect.
And I'll maybe just elaborate a little bit on that too, is, as everyone is saying, getting out to events. So we actually hosted with Nate and Sate, the polytechnics in both Edmonton and Calgary, 4-hour demonstration. So we invited, whether you were a fleet operator, a technician, or someone that just wanted to know about dual fuel, the opportunity to come out, touch, see, feel the technology, learn about it, and that kind of thing. Right now, when we talk about, so our system is a kit format. So we do the first pilots, get it all set up. And then we have an extensive dealer network that will install the technology, including Velocity. And so we actually are the ones that are providing the training. Now, having said that, in September, there's going to be an offerings through NATE micro-credential program where industry can learn about, dual fuel and that whole, and just hydrogen as a whole, as well as providing an operator training course. So it's a half-day kind of a course where operators actually learn about it. So instead of us providing that programming, which we currently do, it will actually be done through a polytechnics, and that can then be scaled to multiple different platforms, whether you're in Edmonton or in Toronto. So those are the types of things that we're definitely seeing a change in industry. So similar to what we have right now with a green seal program for a journeyman heavy duty technician, it'll be a red seal program that heavy duty technicians will be able to have those credentials. And that applies to not only dual fuel, but hydrogen fuel cell vehicles and EV vehicles. So even a passenger, a Toyota Mirai, or applications like that, they'll have a certification that backs it, that they've done certain credentials for it.
You kind of stole my thunder there, Rebecca, with my next question. So can you share any collaborative efforts or partnerships with other companies or research institutions that have helped advance your hydrogen technology initiatives? I know you just mentioned Polytechnics Canada, but actually you guys all are collaborating, Evan, Rebecca, and Bob and Ian. So can you speak to a little bit more about that?
This hydrogen ecosystem is a very unique one. Everyone kind of knows everyone, and if you don't know them, then someone else knows. So we, even, Bav and Vern's, team, we were connected through them from doing, I don't actually even know where we met. But anyways, we've met through multiple, I don't know because we've met on multiple different platforms. But, Alberta Innovates, the ERA has been a huge advocate, in this ecosystem, organizations such as CHA, Alberta Hydrogen, the AMTA, the different BCTA, so the different trucking associations within Western Canada, they've all played a key part in this. So it's not just one organization, it's, everyone kind of coming together. Even on the hydrogen supply side, there's, lots of different supply. Some are going to be available tomorrow and some are going to be available in 2027. So kind of having an understanding of where industry is going, have definitely been a key player in that. And it's just connecting and networking. Huge events like the Canadian Hydrogen Convention that was just taking place in April. There's another huge event happening with the AMTA in September. I do not know the exact date, but Kessia will tell me because so there's, big events that are happening within, the industry as a whole. Even Kelly, one of our team members, he's going to be in Halifax the end of this month. So if anyone's in Halifax, you can connect with us. I'm more than happy to set up a meeting with you. But it's across all of Canada, not just, Western Canada. It's everywhere, and even into the US.
Yeah, and just building upon Rebecca's point, I think I'd like to also give a shout out to Edmonton Global and AMTA as being kind of really, really great connectors within the Canadian hydrogen ecosystem. They've really helped us connect with, DTI and Rebecca, as well as other players on the infrastructure side. And so it really will take a village to stand up this ecosystem, ensure there is enough fuel supply, enough vehicles on the road. And so, yeah, we're excited to work with DTI on the next gen truck. And we're also excited to collaborate with fleets to ensure that what we're developing really meets their needs.
And with that, we are actually at time for our Q&A session, and we have a lot of questions, so I'll just jump right into it. So the first question actually is, exposure to hydrogen is causing embrittlement in metals, especially at high temperatures and humidity. My hydrogen lab at UBC is dealing with this issue. Have you observed premature engine failures because of hydrogen-induced damage?
Yeah, so I'll start this question. We have not experienced any embrittlement, and the reason and way that we are not experiencing that is because as that piston is going up and down, our hydrogen is injecting into it, so it's not flogging the system and allowing hydrogen to kind of go where it wants. So we actually calibrate when we put that hydrogen in and the amount of time that it puts it in, so that it's combusting immediately. It's down to the millisecond of when it's combusting. It's not, sitting and can flow where it wants to go. So that's a big part of, how we've been able to not have that embrittlement issue. I don't know if anyone else wants to elaborate on that. Good.
Great answer.
Yeah,
Oh,
I can
go
talk
ahead.
about embrittlement within our part of the system. I mean, we carefully select all of our materials to ensure that they don't suffer from embrittlement. We've got loads of data to support that, and there's a well understood set of materials that are hydrogen compatible.
Great. And the next question is, do you see any challenges / opportunities related to hydrogen policy and its implications to retrofitting? I know we touched on this earlier, but if you want to maybe elaborate more.
Yeah, so definitely it's, what we're finding within government today is they went net zero, and we really need to change that, wording to decarbonization, that walk before we run. So there has been some start of good programming. So there's that green freight program phase 2 that'll cover 50% of the retrofit. It was very segmented though. It did not apply to motor coaches, which is another key ally in this with diversified applications. So they are taking baby steps, but a lot of the programming policies that are in place are net zero, so we don't actually qualify for them. So that's kind of policy that needs to be adjusted. But we're starting to make the waves to, be able to include this technology as, these early adopters have some type of incentive to decarbonize.
And speaking of early adopters, our next question is about early adopters. Are the early adopters of dual fuel typically relying on hydrogen stations, or are they operating their own refuel stations in their marshalling yards?
So most of them are currently doing at their yards and fueling. That's going to be the premise for the next little bit. There is, depending on location, hydrogen. So there's, in Edmonton, there's a few different fueling stations. So if it makes sense, one of the big key things to that, though, is hydrogen has to be within 15 minutes. Otherwise, an operator is not going to drive, because why would they do that? So having that hydrogen available to them in a close proximity is a big thing to that. And the current method in which that gets done is having that trailer storage.
So we're a return to base. We're also a return to base operation, and we've had to adopt, diesel exhaust fluid. So we're experienced with return to base and having our own fluids or fuels at our locations. Sorry, I lost my train of thought where I was going. Cut in, Ian. I might remember.
To build on that, the return to base aspect, the highest potential fleets for the early adoption of hydrogen and bringing along the consumption required to lower costs is going to be return to base fleets, where they predominantly fuel themselves on their own sites. So they're fueling enough that they can affect the supply chain and get the cost down. And I think that's there's a lot of focus on highway transportation and where the network of fueling stations is going to be. But when you look at these smaller ecosystem where you have two or three hydrogen sources in the industrial heartland, or the whatever you want to call it, and then you look at your return to base transporters in your geography, I think that's where your critical mass is going to come from for the hydrogen supply chain.
Yeah, one of the points that Rebecca made there was about time and the drivers driving around to find this fuel. So another, area where we have our back against the wall is our ELDs. So we can't go get diesel at one place and then have hydrogen 30 minutes away and burn all of the drivers' daily working time. So I haven't really heard of any policy expansion on, if we have a dual fuel unit, are we allowed 30 more minutes in a day? I haven't really heard anything expand on that. So it's mostly going to be a return to base, because we can kind of work around that by burning time in our own yards that's not going towards the driver's ELDs.
Yeah, interesting.
And definitely to emphasize, it's funny, when we started in the dual fuel space, we thought long haul Class 8, that's going to be our business market. Turns out that is not the way it happened. All of our customers to date have been returned to home base and different applications. David Richards, who's not in this call today, but he's the general manager at Diversified, right? So they are very much, they drive up in Fort McMurray, drive around to the neighborhoods, get on the highway, go to a site, sit. So they're very much, that return to home base. And that's who we've personally seen as early adopters of the technology, is really that particular application. Not to say long haul can't and won't. It's just, in our experience, that's who our main demographic has been to date.
Great. Those are great answers, guys. This question is quite long, so we're just going to break it up a little. So what comprehensive recommendations can you provide for developing a training plan focused on servicing hydrogen systems? Specifically, what key areas should be covered, what safety protocols need to be emphasized, and what best practices should be included to ensure effective and safe handling of hydrogen technologies? Additionally, what resources and training methodologies would you suggest to enhance the learning experience for the trainees?
I can answer that one. That is a very loaded question. I have all the answers to it. I just don't know if I can answer them in this. But the main, way that we have this information is on our operations manual. So it's a wonderful 47-page document that goes into all the details on how you do this, what you do here, what hazards are here. All those details are on that document. So, whether they're manually reading that document or it's part of a webinar or, as we were talking about with the NATE and STATE program that's going to be offered, in the fall, those are all the ways that we're making sure that it's available on multiple different channels to fleets to educate and learn. So whether you're an operator or a heavy duty technician, it's specific to that industry or that occupation.
And Evan, I'd like to hear from you, as you probably received this 47-page document, what your experience
I actually haven't.
Coming to him.
So then I guess what was your experience then training your team and even learning yourself, because you have a diesel background?
So I'm still at the early stages. Being in Saskatchewan, there's way more buzz going on out in Alberta. So it benefits them having my unit out there to get things rolling. I'm still working on the early stages. So really for training, it's been me in DTI's boardroom talking to their engineers, learning about it that way. Once I get a supply and I get my truck back, then that's when I'll go through the stuff with DTI. But it's more just been preliminary training and just sparking curiosity with my technicians, telling them what I know, and linking that to my diesel background, and that's about as far as we've gotten so far. Great.
And if anyone is interested in connecting with Rebecca later, we will be sending out an email after this with all of the information. So you feel free to connect with any of the speakers today. So moving on to the next question then. Fleet adoption being the first step, what developments do you foresee in bulk transport of hydrogen as demand grows, i.e. multi-bottle / tube trailers, bulk liquid transport, pipeline?
Yeah, I can start with that. So already today in Canada, there's a lot of tube trailer transport of hydrogen gas. That's how most of the hydrogen gets to the stations today. Air Products is building a massive liquefaction plant in Edmonton, so that will lend itself to a lot of liquid-based delivery in Western Canada. And then we're also working with a couple of other companies on cryocompressed delivery. So finding a way to leverage the same onboard technology that we've got for trucks and bringing that to the bulk transport space to bring down the cost of delivering that hydrogen. And so getting a lot of good interest there. And then pipelines, a great option if you can do it. Takes a while to get them stood up, but they'll always be the most cost-effective way to move hydrogen around. It's just a matter of which decade.
Great. Does anyone have anything else to add?
I'm not really in the production side, and that's not my expertise, but being in rural Saskatchewan, I really think eventually the industry is going to have to get to small hydrogen generators in rural areas produced by green energy. We have lots of wind, we have lots of sun, we have lots of space here. It can create jobs in small towns, maintenance operators, that kind of stuff, and then you're not trucking that fuel around. We might just downsize to the point of trucking what we call torque fluid, which will be diesel in 50 years, right? We may just not call it diesel anymore. So that's kind of where I see it going on the very far scale when we get to that point.
And going back to our previous question, we have another question on top of that. So no argument that return to base has been only implementation of hydrogen to date, but economic space demands on the trucker to operate a complex fueling system are barriers. Will HTEC's recent announcement of a network of HD stations at commercial card locks from Vancouver Island to Prince George make it easier for trucking companies to consider hydrogen?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's not just HGen, it's everyone coming together. So, to Evan's point there, what may work for one province doesn't work for another province. Some areas might, end up doing pipeline, where others might do truck. So it's not a one size fits all for every single region. Whereas pipeline wouldn't work as good in BC because obviously we have wonderful mountains. So there's lots of not one size fits all for all jurisdictions, but there's a solution for every jurisdiction.
And are return to base refueling solutions being internally developed, or are you relying on turnkey commercial solutions?
So at small scale, they are, but at big scale, it's, organizations like H-Tech and Air Products and several other different, hydrogen supplies that are going to be prevalent for industry.
Yeah, exactly what Rebecca said. So like Vern has our own liquid-based mobile refueler to fill some of our pilot trucks. That's really just for early adoption, where we're really excited about H-Tech and Air Products announcements on their station networks in Canada. That will really help with anxiety on fuel supply.
And just to note, I've turned on everyone's mics and cameras, so if you want to raise your hand and ask your question in person, feel free to do so. No questions. I think we're actually out of questions, but we have 4 minutes in this, so we'll start wrapping up. And I have one final question. So if we were to run this panel again in 5 years, what new developments in the industry or you hope we'll be talking about?
You cut out on my end during your question. I don't know if that happened to everybody.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping in 5 years, and kind of toward that government policy impacts. One of the things I'm hoping to see is government spends much of its time on understanding how to get the supply side to come together, so you get the critical mass, but then also supports the entrepreneurs in this space, right? Because that's where the innovation is going to come from. This and the speed and the drive to make these things happen. Whereas a company like our company, like Lafarge, we're kind of in the middle, right? So we transport and we manufacture, and we're kind of in the middle. So we're looking at our governments to put the right structure together, and then the entrepreneurs to literally push these things into place because it benefits them. It benefits them. So I'm looking 5 years out to have this conversation about all these competing solutions and saying, okay, I'm not sure if I want to be a sole provider. Let's pick the 2 people that we want to work with, or the 3, and then in a way that includes all kinds of perspectives on how easy it is to run equipment today compared to when we first adopted it. It was so challenging and so scary and so many barriers, but now it's just normalized within our shops, things like that.
And I think from my standpoint, it's really that, policy is going to adopt the decarbonization wording instead of net zero wording, so that, this is an industry standard, that we're done with that whole educational piece where, industry understands the technology and, doesn't have that pinch point anymore. And then for obviously the Guardian HDS product to be a mainstay for industry to decarbonize their existing fleet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Bob, you're muted.
Almost got through it without doing that. For me, it would be that really that the vehicle cost and the fuel cost is either at diesel parity or has a clear line of sight to diesel parity. So it's really in the kind of the accelerated phase of adoption, where we can start talking about thousands and tens of thousands of vehicles with DTI's dual fuel technology, Vern storage, and then eventually fuel cells and hydrogen engines. So really looking forward to the economics really panning out in 5 years.
Great.
And in 5 years, I'm going to speak from the technician side of things. We've been through emissions since 2008. It's been a roller coaster that just never seems to end, of changes, updates, some good, some bad. It seems like we take a few steps forward, then we're a few steps back, just depending on model year. But I would really like to see the federal government or Canada come up with their own emissions regulation standards. So you could just build a truck that's reliable for our climate, that has a certain tiered engine, and then we can add on a built in Canada solution that we've proven works for us. Well, that's what I'd really like to see.
Perfect timing. We've just hit time. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for this wonderful webinar. After this, I will send the recording over to all of the attendees, and to anyone that we didn't get to answer your questions, please feel free to email the speakers or email me, and then I can forward you to the speakers. And with that, thank you so much for attending and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.